Hi, Stefan the BMW DIY guy. My project today is going to be a really big one, and it's going to be the culmination of all of my suspension work, and it's going to be a Bilstein B16 PSS10, and that is a long name, suspension kit into my car. I'm really excited to get these coilovers installed. So not only is it going to give me a bunch of additional features like adjustability as far as height, but my car is at 66,000 miles. You have to start to look at the fact that your suspension does eventually wear out. Now, I'm not showing any negative behavior out of my current OEM sports suspension, but it's definitely near towards the end of the life of its lifespan. So I'm really excited to get these in my car and show the difference that it can make. Plus, with the adjustability that you get out of the B16s, you can actually lower the car a little bit. It's got a range of adjustment. Now with the comfort kit that I have, the adjustment range goes from 10 millimeters to 30 millimeters. So when I look at this, I'm excited about this. Now, for me in particular, I can't lower that much. Where I live, I have a really steep driveway. So if with the normal kit where you can go from 30 to 50, there is no way I could go down 50 millimeters and not scrape my car coming in and out of my driveway. So I definitely decided to go with the comfort kit. There's a little bit of difference between the two and some of the spring rates, but really not enough to make that much difference for me. So I am really excited to get this in my car. It really is the culmination of all the work I've done to bring the car together, to really tighten it up with the sway bar and bushings and everything else. Now to add that suspension element to bring the car into a level of control that is something I've been really looking forward to. So let's get out to the garage, get started, and go through this project. All right, let's get this started. So as you can see, my wheels are off and I've got the car already in the air. So as I always do, I talk about being safe when you do this. So I'm using my quick jacks, which are great. Make sure that if you get your car in the air, you do it in a safe fashion. You can do this a corner at a time. So it doesn't have to be all in the air at the same time, but you can use jacks and jack stands. Do not trust your life to a cheap jack. Do not get underneath the car. Don't put your car in the air and then get yourself in a place where you can get hurt. It's not worth it. So 17 millimeter lug bolts to get the wheels off. If you don't know the trick, like for example, my rears had not been off for a while, so I got all 5 bolts out, and of course the rears don't want to come off. You just turn around backwards and kick at it with a shoe on, kick at the tire, kind of one side then the other, one side and the other, kind of a back kick to loosen the tire up and it'll come off. So I've got all 4 off, I've got it up in the air, I've got my suspension laid out, which is really exciting. I can't wait to get this in my car. So as you can see, we're gonna get this installed. School bus going by. So we're gonna do this. I'm gonna do the rears first. So let's move over and look at the rears. So, I'm gonna use a combination of using my jack as well, because we're gonna be taking the shock out, which you can see right there, and we're gonna be taking the spring out as well. So the very first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna take off this cover, which is a series of 10 millimeter bolts, because we have to be able to get to the bolts on either side, here and here on either side. So I'm gonna take the covers off on both rears, which are a series of 10 millimeter, and then we're gonna take the shock bolt out next. So the rear covers are off. It's 4 10 millimeter nuts, and I've taken those off and set them aside. Now the other thing you can see is I've used my floor jack to lift the swing arm up. So what you're doing is actually releasing some pressure, because you're compressing the spring, but you're releasing pressure, especially on the hub bolt, the silver one that you can see right there. So the inner one, which is the shock bolt, which you can see is pointing towards the rear. You want to make sure your orientation is correct as you go through all this. The shock bolt is an 18. You need to hold it on both sides. You can use 2 18 millimeter wrenches, or an 18 millimeter wrench and a socket, or an impact driver, which I'm going to use, and a socket, or excuse me, my wrench on the other side. And then you've got the swing arm, that hub bolt right there, which is a 21. So I've jacked the hub up to about ride height. When I was doing my sway bar on the passenger side, I didn't have the swing arm up quite high enough, like probably off by as little as maybe an inch. And I didn't quite have enough pressure, and it put a lot of pressure on that 21 millimeter hub bolt right there at the end of the swing arm, and it really hung me up for a while. Where when I did this side, I had it up high enough and it came right out. No big deal. I mean, it came out in like 10 seconds. So make sure, I'm probably higher than I need to be right now, but I'm at about ride height, as you can see. I've used a couple of my quick jack rubber blocks, which I like because it keeps me from putting metal on metal. So I'm going to take both those bolts out. Then we're going to look to take the shock out. You've got some reverse torques at the top, so we're going to take those out. We'll take the spring out, but I'm going to walk through every piece. First thing we're going to do is take those two bolts out, the 18 millimeter, 21 millimeter. Make sure you remember the orientation. The shock bolt points toward the rear. The swing arm hub bolt right there at the end points towards the motor, points towards the front. So I'm going to take both those out. All right, so both bolts came out, just super easy. And again, having the hub up to about ride height really makes a difference. So they just came straight out, not a problem. And then those reverse torques are E12s. So again, linked in the comments will be the impact wrench that I love using. It's amazing. I can't believe I never had one prior to this. Just zip those right out there. It's an E12 reverse torques. So now the shock is loose. The swing arm is loose, and all you have to do is just let the jack down and move the swing arm away. The strut will come right out. Take the spring out, and I'm going to show you what you're going to do, because you're going to take the top hat, or you're going to take the top off your existing strut to replace onto the new one. So we'll walk through that next. Okay, so obviously both are out, and I want to show something really quick because it can hang you up if you don't do it. So you're going to reuse the foot here on your OEM spring. You're not going to reuse the top cap. But the other thing that didn't come out right there is this guy. This did not come out. So you have to make sure that this top cup comes out, and it is adhered down pretty well. So you need to make sure that this comes out because your other spring is going to fit up into this space differently. That top mount, that adjustable top mount is going to fit in here. And if this is here, it's not going to work. It's not going to fit into place properly. So we need to make sure to get this out. So I want to make sure you saw that. So sometimes you can make do with simple tools if you have the right tool. I'm always going to be the first advocate to use it. I don't have a pass-through socket wrench. I haven't needed one, so I was able to come up with an alternative. So you've got a 15 millimeter nut here at the top, but it's a center hold. So this is a T5 Torx bit that I've been able to hold. Now, if you've got sockets that have that faceted top, it's even easier. So what I did was I just took my 16 millimeter socket and a pair of vice grips, just held the center, and then slowly walked my vice grips around. Now, I did okay. I didn't chew my socket up at all. The torque on this top nut really isn't that high. So it's not like you've got to break free a really high torque nut. You can always use a little bit of penetrant like WD-40 or something, because it's definitely a little crusty. But I was able to back that nut off by holding here. If you've got the proper tool or a pass-through socket, that's a better way of doing it. But in this case, this worked for me. So you back this nut off so you can take this top hat piece off, and we're going to transfer it to the new rear strut. All right, as you can see, the OEM top hat is in place, but let's talk about this here really quickly because it gave me a little bit of trouble. So the top hat should be down and snug, and this 17 millimeter nut provided by Bilstein should be at 19 foot-pounds of torque. Now, what I found was I was putting the nut on, I couldn't get the nut all the way down, and this top hat would move up and down. You know, when I was first working on it, probably as much as an inch up and down, which is just bad, right? It can't be loose. So I took it back off, and you could see on the threads, you could see how much paint had scraped off on how far the nut had made it. So I tried it again, got it a little bit further, tried it again, got it a little bit further. And so I took it back off and took a steel brush, like that guy right there. I took a steel brush and brushed off all the threads that I kind of half scraped the paint off of, and then also kind of brushed at the lower threads I hadn't gotten to yet, and then it went straight into place just fine. Torqued it down to 19 pounds, no big deal. So while we're here on the workbench, let's talk about the spring perch. Now, I'm gonna mess names up on some of these components, I freely admit it from time to time, right? But so forgive me that. So this is the orientation it's going to be at the top of your spring, right? This is going to be in the car. This is going to be touching the spring. Now, this is the B16 Comfort Kit, so it's got a 10 millimeter to 30 millimeter adjustment range to potentially lower your car, which is something I do want to do. I want to lower the car down a little bit and work on that height, right? But So this is the adjustment ring. Now the rears only have a single adjustment ring. The fronts have a double that I'll explain when I get there, right? But the lower this ring is, so if this is the top and this is the bottom, the lower the ring is, the taller the gap is, right? Does that make sense? So you have all that pressure pressing on this ring. So if I'm going to lower it later, it's going to be easier because the pressure and weight of the car is going to be pushing the ring this direction as it goes, so I can adjust it more easily. Now if you're going the other way, so if I start like maybe in the middle, and I'm not going to start as low as possible, that seems like a foolish place to start. If you start in the middle or someplace similar, trying to crank this down is going to be against all of the weight of the car, all of the spring weight, everything else. It's going to be a heck of a lot harder. It's a lot easier to go from higher to lower than lower to higher. So I'm going to get my rear spring perches, or get these two pieces set to the exact same height, and I'm actually just going to set and make sure that this is flush with this, the ring is flush with the interior. That's my measurement for the rears, and then I'm going to compare them also against the fronts to make sure the fronts are set to the same height as well. Now keep in mind, once this is all done, you need to take your car in to get it balanced and get your suspension adjusted, or excuse me, alignment adjusted, but you know, get it close, right? So make sure that you try to get it to the right height and equal to the best of your ability. So we're going to go back over, we're going to take our spring now. You also take the spring bed. This is the OEM spring bed. And what you're going to do is it just fits into place. Okay, as you can see, it's kind of cupped on one end. That's the way it cups up against this end. So you just set it into place here and turn it until it stops. Okay, so we're going to get the spring into place. We're going to get with this top spring adjustment. And then we're going to get the suspension, or get the strut in place, and this side is coming together. And then we're just going to repeat it on the other side. I'm only going to show one side each because it's just a repeat of the same work on the other side. All right, so as you can see, it's in. So what you have is in those reverse torques, those are 28 Newton meters Nm. So those are torqued into place so you can fit. And make sure that you put that rubber gasket and that plastic cap back on the top of your strut. So snap those back into place, you can fit it up into place, and then I hand put the reverse torques into place, and so they would be nice, and so it would hold in place, and then I torque them down to 28 Newton meters. Okay, and then you take and you fit the spring into place, right? So you can fit the spring in, you have to take the swing arm, press the swing arm down to fit the spring up into place with the spring perch here, right? So that's all set there. Now the other thing is the foot, that spring bed that you put it into has a little bump on it. That little bump goes right here in the front. There's a hole that it goes down through to make sure it's in the correct orientation, so that's set properly. Now the other thing that I did as well is the red mark on this is actually to the inside. Now that I see this in place, it's possible that I might have wanted to have it to the inside, or excuse me, to the outside on this side, but I really think that's only because if the tire is here, you're not going to be able to see it at all, right? Well, if the tire's on and you get your head underneath the tail, you can adjust, right? So click 1, click 2. Now, the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set this at a 1 for now. So it's on a red mark on the inside, set to 1, because I want it to be as tall as possible and the least amount of rebound for now until it gets adjusted and balanced and set up properly. Plus, I have a steep driveway, so I'm never going to lower it probably fully. But, so you get all that, you get that set into place, you get your spring into place, and then you get your jack underneath and bring the swing arm back up and bring the hub up to right height. And you make sure to guide it around. Let me get here underneath, forgive the extra light here. So as you come down, there's that knuckle right here, right? So make sure that as you bring the swing arm up, it goes around that and just jack it up smoothly into place until everything is lined back up. So once you get it all lined back up and in place, you can put in, and in my case, this hub bolt actually lined up first. So yeah, I got it into place. That's the 21 millimeter. Again, this is the back, this is the front, so it's going the right orientation. And then I put the strut bolt in once it got raised up a little bit higher and got that into place, and that's pointing towards the rear of the car. Now, this is 100 Newton meters This is 165 Newton meters. In a previous video, I think I might have messed that up a little bit. So this is 100, and this is 165. So they're torqued down properly, then I let the jack down. As you can see, it's all done. And it looks darn good from here. So this is all set, and it's set into place. I'm gonna do the other side now, just so I can do them in order. But in the video, I'm gonna jump to the fronts, because I don't need to show you the other side. It's just gonna be repeated the same thing. So I'm gonna do the other side, then I'm gonna move to the fronts. All right, so here we are at the front. So I've done a couple of things already. So I've already removed the sway bar link arm, which goes through right here. So this is going to be a 16 millimeter nut, right? But is a center hold. Now, if you don't have a pass-through socket, you can actually do a little bit of a trick. What I did is I took a 16 millimeter open socket or open wrench and held the nut, then used the T30 on a wrench to actually turn the bolt itself. So instead of turning the nut, I turned the bolt, which is the same thing, and it backed the nut right off. And so then it just comes right out. So you can get around having to have a specialized tool. Now down here at the bottom, right here, where I'm pointing, you're gonna have, holding the collar, this is an 18 millimeter on this side, and it's a 16 millimeter nut on this side. So it's mismatched. So you back that out, and we're gonna have to spread this to help get the strut out in a second. But so you take the linkage arm off, you take that bolt out, and then you can take all the bolts out of the top. Now the other thing I've done really quickly is I've supported the hub with my jack. I really haven't raised it at all. I just don't want it to sag, especially when I take those top bolts out, because it's gonna sag away because it's the strut that's holding it in place, right? So I'm going to, the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tape off my fender well, because lots of advice that I see say it's a little bit of a struggle to get it out, and you've got metal that you can bang around as you're trying to angle it to get it out, and you don't want to chip your paint. So I'm going to go find some tape. So I'm going to get that taped up, I'm going to take those top bolts out, and then I'm also going to show you the little collar spreader tool that we're going to take in to help spread that metal collar open. All right, so as long as the camera will focus, here's the little collar spreader tool I got. So you can see you insert it into the split at the back of that collar, and then turn it 90 degrees where it'll widen. So that'll give you just enough room to slide the strut out and give it a little bit of room. All right, so you're gonna see my towel job here because I couldn't find any tape. I wanted to show one trick that I actually saw that was gonna work really well, and worked really well for me, because so you've got the bottom loose, right? So you've got that collar spread using your tool, and then you undo the bolts at the top. So at this point, you're trying to lift the strut out of that socket, which can be trouble, right? So one thing you can do, and what I just did, so I took the bolts out of the top, the 3 16 millimeters and the 1 reverse Torx, and then the strut is free, but I was really struggling to get a grip to get the strut up and out, to get it out of that socket. So I fed it back up into place, put one of the 16 millimeter bolts back in, and then pressed down on the hub, and it popped out really, really well. I also added just a little bit, if you couldn't tell, a little bit of WD-40 just to make sure, because it's really grungy. So, and it moved right out. It probably rose about 2 inches or so, so it's loose now. So now all you have to do is press the hub down and work out the strut. All right, so let's get caught up on where we are. So as you can see, the hub is pushed down and out. So as I mentioned, I loosened the collar around it, pressed down on the collar with, a single bolt left up in here to gain that extra, inch or 2 inches that you can get. And then the strut will sit kind of 3/4 out of the collar, and it really is pushing down on the hub to get it to come down, and then it'll come free and you can walk it out. So that's out. Now, what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to compress your springs to get your top hat off. Now, I've already got mine off, so let me give you some advice. So first of all, if anybody's going to be like, that's the worst spring compressor you've ever seen, I agree. I don't own one, I rented one, and what I got was not a good one. So let's talk about a good one here for a second. A good one normally is like these big metal C-clamps with a bolt. The C-clamps go around, and then the bolt holds the spring into place so it can't come loose, and there's 2 of them, and there's a drive shaft that causes them to screw towards each other. And very frequently there's two of them. So there's one on each side to compress the spring successfully. The rental where I could rent one, I got, and it's not good. So please either get the right tool or rent the right tool. I did not, and I will link a better one in the description of the video. So I was able to compress the springs enough to get tension off the top hat. Now, what you've got on the top hat is you've got a 18 millimeter nut right here on the top. You've got an 18 millimeter nut, and you've got a 6 millimeter or T6 counterhold in the center again. So what I was able to do was, actually in this case, I actually started with my impact wrench, and I noticed that for whatever reason the center strut wasn't spinning, so I didn't need my counterhold. But what you're really going to need is a pass-through socket, an 18 millimeter pass-through socket, and a 6 millimeter Allen down in the center for the counterhold. I think I got lucky. Hopefully I'll get lucky on the other side as well. So the top hat is off, and that's what we're going to transfer over to the new one. Now, the other thing we've got on the new ones is I'm going to have to deal with the spring compressor again, which is going to be interesting. The other thing we're going to do is, here is the factory rubber that goes around. If you read in the instructions, they actually want you to cut off a section of this and transfer it over there to help shield the top of the new ones as well. I believe it's 40 millimeters, I believe, so I'm going to measure 40 millimeters and cut this off and reuse the top of this. So it works well and looks nice and helps protect it. So I'm going to cut this section off first. I'm going to get the spring compressor over on the new one and get that compressed, and then get the top hat into place and get it torqued down. All right, now that I actually have the proper tools, let me show you what we've done. So we took the hat off, so we've compressed the spring using the proper McPherson strut type spring compressors. So you hook as high as you can on the highest loop you can and the lowest loop you can, and you tighten down on both sides so the spring doesn't bulge on either side and it compresses. Obviously this is on the new one, which I had to compress to get the spring hat on, or to get the hat on, right? So, but this shows you how it should look. So I had to compress the spring on the old one, was able to get the top off. So that's a 16 millimeter nut on top of the other that I was able to get off. And actually I used my impact wrench. It's a center hold again, but my impact wrench was able to get it off really nice and cleanly. And then we've got the new one here, which is also 17 millimeter with a washer underneath. So it's hat, washer, then nut, and that's tightened down to 28 foot-pounds. And you can see the spring is set up right as well. The spring is set up and still with the hooks on. Now you can also see this is that OEM piece of the rubber that I took off, and I cut off 40 millimeters. So that's about 1.5 inches of it, and it'll extend down and help cover the other. Now also you'll see there's a little bump stop right here, so make sure that that's up against the spring. So now I can take these off, and then we can install the strut back into place. All right, now that the hat's on and in place, and it goes in roughly this orientation, and you can turn it to adjust it as you put it in, but it's going to go in roughly this orientation. The bumps will match against bumps up here. There's holes where those bumps will go to help guide you into place. You just slide it in, and there's a little notch. There's a little metal pin that sticks out right here that slides into the collar right there. So you make sure you're in the proper orientation. Then it's a matter of just simply pressing down and in. You can use a jack to lift your hub and the strut back up to help lift you back up into place, and then secure from the top. And I'll have all the proper torque for the collar down here, for your sway bar arm, and all of the nuts at the top in a moment. But let's get it up into place and get it secure. All right, everything's put together and bolted back up, so let's walk through that really quickly. So 56 Newton meters, 30 on these. Make sure they're in nice and straight and level. Like I said, you've got these bumps here to help you guide it in. As we look down underneath, so we have this collar bolt right here, so that is put back in, and along with, and forgive the bad lighting here, so I'll see if I can get a little bit better lighting right here. There we go. Make sure that you have this collar back into place, because this piece fits back out and is held in by this bolt. So you put that bolt through, that is at 44 newtons. And then our sway bar connector arm here is torqued down as well. So everything is back together. You can see the position of where the stops are, and everything is all back up. So at this point I can let the jack down and this side is done. So all I need to do is go and repeat on the other side. All right, so let's do a quick walkthrough. So I have adjusted my spring height a little bit based on some great recommendations. So my rears are still where they are. My fronts are here, and I'm going to be walking through adjusting these. So I didn't want you to go, hey, wait a minute, did that just change? Yes, it did. So it's also easiest to adjust the fronts. It's really easy to dial that top black collar, which is the adjustment collar, upwards. It's really easy. It doesn't take a lot of effort. So make sure your backs are set right, and then you can adjust the fronts as need be. I've also adjusted the rebound based on recommendations. My fronts are set to 5 and my rears are set to 4 currently right now. So you can see it's all back together. The sway bar link arm is on. Everything else is tightened and torqued down. I've got the back wheels on, except for that one. And I'm going to put the front wheels on, then I'm going to lower the car down, and we're all good to go. So keep in mind at this point, you should really, your car's going to be adjusted quite a bit. Keep an eye on alignment. Make sure that everything was done equally. Make sure that if you adjusted the height, that all of the sides are matching. Both rears are the same. Both fronts are the same. Your rebounds are set the same. So my rebounds are 5 and 5. Rears are 4 and 4. So make sure you go through all that and do one last walkthrough as you go through, and you'll be good to go. So I'm going to put my wheels on and lower my car back down. I'm all done. All right, all done. Car's cleaned up, tools put away. As you can see, this is not a small project, so you can pretty much plan on spending your day in the garage if you've got it. This is something you can do. Now, I really want to stress, make sure to take your car for alignment and most likely weight balancing as well when you're done. Your alignment is going to be significantly off. I've read some people that say, well, you don't really need to have your alignment checked. I disagree. I think it's really important. Now, the other thing is I've also heard as well that you need to give the suspension time to settle, okay? I've heard that really strongly. When I talked with my alignment shop that does race work as well, and I talked to them to schedule it the very next day to get my alignment done, they were like, no, you do not need to give the suspension time to settle. Bring it straight in. And so I did, and the difference really was really dramatic. So my car was not happy with me as I drove it from my garage into my suspension shop so they could get that taken care of. But I trust them, they're a great shop. Make sure you plan to get that done as well. This is not something you can ignore. So thank you to Bilstein for being a fantastic partner on this project. I just cannot be more excited to have this in my car. I'm now, after my suspension and weight balancing and the alignment has been done, I've had the chance to drive the car a little bit, and ironically enough, coming home from the suspension shop, I avoided an accident driving my car, and it was crisp and clean. The control adjustments were just instantaneously responsive. No body roll, no slop. Went right around somebody who was accordioning stopping in front of me. So I really feel like it's already paid off, as it were. So definitely look at this in your car. All the tools, all the torque, everything you need is going to be listed in the description below. If you like what you've seen, please click subscribe and the little alarm bell, and you can get notifications when I have new videos coming out, because even with something this big, I have more projects coming. So I look forward to seeing you on my next video.